All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back again, College Football Pros. I am Nick, he is Drew, and today we will be talking about our favorite Heisman Trophy contenders. It's been a good couple of years of football with some really strong performances from the Heisman winners, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that it'll be any different this year. Do you, Drew?
I do not, and I think the trend in the past couple of years has been the younger guys, the redshirt freshmen, the sophomores, and the younger guys that have really came out of nowhere from the season before. I think this is the year where you see a senior, a veteran guy really take that trophy and really take it to the next level.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, we saw Mariota last year take it, and he was well-deserved. I was looking over the stats, and 57 touchdowns that he produced. It's asinine.
It's you can't stop that. I don't care what level you're at. You throw that many touchdowns and attribute that many touchdowns to your name. There's no questioning you deserve that trophy.
So I guess the best place to start out is I think we could each take a couple of minutes here to just talk about who we think is going to be the Heisman favorite going in. I'm pretty sure that we're probably on the same page on this one, but we could still give our opinions on it, and for me, it's Treyvon Boykin. I mean, considering that he's returning his linemen, he's returning his back, he's returning the receivers that were the most productive, I just can't fathom a situation where he isn't able to at least match what he did last year, and that was a lot. I mean, I can recall one specific game, and I think it might have been against SMU, where he ran past and caught a touchdown. I mean, that's absurd to be that usable. And my whole belief for the entirety of the TCU team is just that they're playing with that proverbial chip on their shoulder that Ohio State had carried them to the national championship. I think the TCU team has to feel a little bit dejected that they were third going into the final rankings for the playoff, and were bumped without doing anything just because the Big 12 doesn't have a championship game. And I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with the fact that, conference champions should be better received for the playoff. But at the same time, that TCU team had just overperformed, and then they went on to prove really exactly how good of a team they were by just crushing Ole Miss.
Yeah, and I think what you said a couple seconds ago was TCU didn't do anything that last week. And I think them having the week off, them not playing at all, was out of sight, out of mind, where teams like Ohio State and the other conferences that have title games, they're right in front of you. They're all over TV, and the Big 12 is sitting at home. Big 12 has to fix that. They want to talk about tiebreakers. They want to talk about what the NCAA can do for them. Just have a conference title game. It's not that difficult of a concept to have a conference title game. But piggybacking off Treyvon Boykin there, he threw for 39-01 last year, 33 touchdowns in that air raid offense of Gary Patterson. You have another year in that system. Aaron Green, as the running back, coming back healthy. Josh Dawson having another year to progress in that system. This guy right now has to be the number one Heisman favorite.
Yeah, and we're not even talking about Colby Listenby and Ty Slanina and a variety of weapons that Boykin has at his disposal in that offense. I just can't fathom how they will not be one of the highest potency offenses in college football. And I mean, it's directly because of the type of offensive show that they'll put on that has to push Boykin into the front runner position in terms of the Heisman Trophy. I'm going to stick with quarterback for my next Heisman favorite, and that's going to be Dak Prescott. I don't think he does nearly the amount of damage through the air that Boykin can, but I don't think that offense is necessarily set up for that. I think that he's going to be an exciting player because of what he's able to do with his feet. I think he's probably slightly better with his feet than Treyvon Boykin.
Yeah.
And I just think that, it's going to be somebody who's setting off fireworks. You're not going to find a consistent guy who just, he's just consistent and makes it to the Heisman Trophy. You look at Marcus Mariota, was he consistent? Absolutely. But he was absurdly consistent. I mean, he was averaging, if they played 13 games, 57 touchdowns, breaks out to 4.5 a game, attributable just to him.
Yeah.
That's not easy to come by. That's not easy production. You're not going to find many other players, if any other players at all, that have that type of ability in terms of production. So I think that we're definitely looking at a situation where the production coming from Dak Prescott could definitely put the Mississippi State quarterback in a position. And actually, I'm looking at his stats, and it wasn't as if he was awful through the air, because he actually had 3,400 passing yards. It was just the absurd amount of touchdowns he racked up on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, 61% completion clip for him, that ranks 39 nationally, last year. So, he has the ability to be very accurate, and you combine that with the ability to run the ball on the ground, and that's a lethal combination. However, if you want to take the flip side of that, and the defenses can absolutely key on him, because the weapons he have around him is not the same weapons that Boykin has at TCU. And I know it's comparing apples and oranges with talent and different teams and different styles, but Dak Prescott coming into this year, obviously we said 27 touchdowns, 11 picks, but you take what he did on the ground, and like you said, that ability to get in the end zone on the ground is unmatched, in that type of scheme.
Yeah, I would agree, and I kind of want to stop where we're at right now and just pose a thought. How much does the success of the team overall lead? Yeah,
huge.
I mean,
huge.
that's going to be a big thing too. I mean, if one of these guys has, it's not even if one of these guys has a misstep, but let's say the defense just plays poorly over a series of weeks. I mean, that's going to be an effect.
Yeah,
because
is that fair? I guess is the better question. If Mississippi State wins 7 games this year and Prescott is in the top 5 of touchdowns, throws 7 interceptions, it cuts that down from last year, throws, completion rate of, say, 67%, but the defense is giving up 50 points a game. How much of that quarterback is reflected on the defense, and is that a fair reflection of a Heisman potential quarterback or any player? And we're talking about quarterbacks, but is that a fair assessment?
I personally don't think so, but what I think really doesn't matter.
Right, we're not lucky enough to have a Heisman vote yet.
Right, I think overall it's always going to come down to how well does the player lead the team, and that doesn't just mean how many touchdowns does he score, but is he getting in the defense's ear, like letting them know, hey, I have a lot on the line. This team has a lot on the line. We need to pick up our game. We need to be at the top level. That's going to be a big thing. I don't think Mississippi State's going to be a bad team.
No, I don't either. But in the tough SEC, they may struggle a little bit. Now, here, let me pose another question to you. Same concept. We know about TCU's high potent offense. We know about the Big 12's lack of defense. What if TCU has 4 or 5 games like they did against Baylor last year? And what if they lose those 4 or 5 games because they lost 67-58? They're losing high-scoring games. Does that take Boykin completely out of the Heisman race?
It's all relative.
It is.
Because, I mean, it just depends what is going on with players around them. Like, it's not often, but I'm sure there's some point, some year you can look back on and say, you know what, overall production just seemed a bit off in terms of the whole college football world. It didn't seem like anybody had, or you could just run into a scenario where it's a more level playing field and, we're sitting with a number 1 team that has 2 losses. And it's conceivable because you could look through almost every team's schedule and say that can be a problem, that could be a problem, that could be a problem. And then there's always the Ohio State, Virginia Tech situations where something that you just don't think is going to be a problem ends up just really biting you. I don't think Baylor would have looked at West Virginia last year and said they're going to be a big problem. I don't think that was part of the conversation at all. Did they end up being a problem? Absolutely. I mean, they essentially ensured that no Big 12 team was going to be in. That loss, I think if Baylor goes undefeated, having beat TCU, this argument might be entirely different that we're having right now. We could be having an argument for, was it fair for Ohio State not to make it? Because you don't know what one win or one loss has an effect in general. You think it wouldn't be that much of an effect, but if Ohio State doesn't feel like they have that much of a shot to get into the championship, they might not win at the level they did at Wisconsin. It might not be that much of a gap.
Yeah, so, and that, you know what? I like that transition right into Ohio State, because my next Heisman contender is ex-Ohio State quarterback. It does not matter which one of the three that you put in there. If that quarterback starts every single game, he's going to be a Heisman contender and probably a Heisman favorite, because just like we talked about, the team is going to be so great around him. Braxton Miller, a veteran guy, fifth-year senior, can run, has the ability to be accurate at times. JT Barrett, guy came in last year, played unreal sans the Virginia Tech game. And then you throw in Cardell Jones, who can throw the ball 75 yards from his knees, led the team to national title by beating Wisconsin, Alabama, and Oregon. So what do you think about any of the three Ohio State quarterbacks?
I'm not buying on any of them being a Heisman contender personally. And
that's ludicrous. Let me stop you right there. That's absolutely ludicrous.
Okay, well, just to look at it from this perspective, I haven't been watching college football that long, but Braxton Miller has been unable to stay healthy in the years that I've watched him play.
Oh, okay.
I recall in 2013, Kenny Guyton spending quite a bit of time at the quarterback position because Braxton was hurt. You're not going to win a Heisman with the field as deep as it is with missing games. I just don't see that being realistic. JT Barrett, if he starts every game, I think there's a case for him to be there. I don't think Cardell Jones, if he starts, holds the same potential because, frankly, I like what Barrett does as a total package much better. Now, I just don't see it being a situation where somehow an Ohio State quarterback starts every game. I know that sounds stupid. I'm not saying
you don't see that happening?
No, I just have a feeling, and it's not going to be from poor quarterback play, but Miller absolutely plays a style that's, I don't know if reckless is a great word, but he's definitely putting himself out there. Barrett's not too far behind. The only one who's really going to give you, I think, a better stability in terms of staying healthy all year is Cardell Jones, but I don't feel like he's the package that the other two are.
All right, so let me ask you right now, and this is an interesting question. If you had to pick right now, and you're playing Virginia Tech, at Virginia Tech, who are you starting? Just roll fast. Who are you starting?
JT Barrett. Then there's no question about it.
If he's healthy, do you keep him in every game? Or, I mean, not every game, but do you keep him in all game, every game? Or do you rotate another quarterback in for a couple series?
I might be one of the few or one of the many, but I don't like quarterback rotations.
Right.
I think that they sound good on paper, like, oh, we could have a quarterback who throws the ball, then we could have a quarterback that runs the ball.
Yeah.
So the defenses and the coaches on the other team, like, they're not going to know that that's what the plan is. And even furthermore than that, it's not like if Miller came in, he can't throw the ball.
Yeah, and here's an interesting concept. We've talked about this off the podcast a couple times, but there's a possibility that Urban Meyer is sitting in his house right now with an Etch-a-Sketch, and he's got all three quarterbacks in the backfield at the same time. It's
possible. I could see him with an Etch-a-Sketch and abacus,
yeah.
Multiple medieval tools, crafting, and coming up with scenarios.
What a fun dilemma to have, though.
You can call it fun. I don't think it's fun. We'll talk about that when we get to Ohio State in a couple of days here. But personally, if I'm going with Ohio State, I'm looking at Zeke. Okay, I'm looking at Ezekiel Elliott, and I'm saying Barrett, cool, Cardell Jones, well enough, but Zeke had the team on his back. Let's
100%.
make no mistake about it. Zeke was the one who was the propelling force. And if I'm looking at anyone on Ohio State, I'm going to look at Ezekiel Elliott, and he's my first running back on the board. And maybe I'm naive, but personally I think it's going to come down to quarterback or running back. in terms of who is going to be winning the Heisman Trophy. And Ezekiel Elliott, I definitely think he's a 2,000-plus yard rusher. I think that he's a guy who could break 24 touchdowns, and it's not entirely shocking, depending on how they decide to use him out of the backfield, if he totals 30. I actually think that the offensive production for this team could be up this year.
Which is let's take 1 second and just realize what you just said, that the offensive production for a team that put up 59 points in their championship game could be better, and I could not agree with you more with the weapons that they have, the coaching style of Urban Meyer. It's unfathomable what this team is possible. And again, this is just on paper. This is just what we see. But Ezekiel Elliott out of the backfield on those swing passes, on those wheel routes, can score every play. And the quarterback, whoever it is, I think all three of them have the accuracy to hit Zeke out of the backfield. And then you just turn around and hand him the ball and let him go 85 yards. That's his explosive capability.
Yeah, I expect Ezekiel Elliott to score 59 points himself against Virginia Tech, probably within the first 18 minutes of the game. I just see this being a complete and total bloodbath, but that's a discussion for another point in time. I just like Ezekiel Elliott. I think that he's the most likely non-quarterback from my perspective right now to be there. He had the coolest jerseys last year when he had them up, like the old school 80s, the 80s where he's showing off the abs. I just think that's really, in a day and age where that's like frowned upon, because the NCAA says, oh, don't draw attention to yourself. Okay, because, having the jersey up really does anything for anybody. But that's I digress. But yeah, I could not agree with you more on Ezekiel Elliott. So where are you at next? Who do you see as being the next potential contender here? Let's stay in the running back situation and Nick Chubb from Georgia. This guy had 1,547 yards. He had interesting stat. He had 4 games of 50-plus yard rushes. That's interesting. We're a guy that he can take it. Just give him the ball in a crowded backfield with Sony Michel, Keith Marshall. But I think Nick Chubb is the guy that gets to start. Mark Richt, the head coach down there, he's going to get him the start, and he's going to let him run with a quarterback situation that is unsettled. This guy could be, just like you said about Zeke, running for over 2,000. I think Nick Chubb can do the same. What do you think? I have no doubts about it. In terms of my daily fantasy usage last year, he was a godsend when Gurley went down because he was cheap. And the team was centered around the running game, right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what they did. And I would just play him because I'm like, well, he's cheap and they're handing the ball off a lot, so it makes sense. And he would produce, and his price would go up, and I'd play him. And then it got to this stretch where I started looking at some of the matchups, and I was like, I don't know if I want the price doesn't seem to justify the matchup here. I don't think that he's got a great matchup, and I wouldn't play him. And I'd be watching on StatCast on my computer, and I would just see these long streaks of red going to the end zone 75, 80 yards and seeing Nick Chubb scored 76-yard touchdown and just dropping my head and saying, I can't believe I didn't do this. Yeah, it's instant, hindsight's 20/20. But here's a question that I pose, and it's an interesting question. It's kind of back in 2001 when the University of Miami had their really great team, arguably the greatest team of all time. I digress. They had a quarterback named Ken Dorsey. They had a running back in Willis McGahee, Clinton Portis, but both of those guys were Heisman contenders. If Nick Chubb is going to win the Heisman, can Keith Marshall or Sony Michel hurt him? You know what I mean? I guess there's a potential argument there to say that they could, but I think a lot of it really depends on how the season goes for Georgia. If Georgia's winning a bunch of games and they want to hold Chubb out because they could be in the playoff hunt, then I think it could to some extent, because I don't think a coach is a coach, and really the player themselves, I don't see them being in a position where a Heisman Trophy trumps the national championship opportunity.
So you're saying if, all right, let's take this two different directions. If they're not having a good season, and Ramsey or whoever the quarterback might be at Georgia struggling, defense is struggling a little bit, Chubb is halfway through the season, do you start lessening his playing time to keep him healthy for next year? And do you play Michelle and
Is there
Marshall?
going to be a next year for him?
Well, I mean, who knows? I mean, he could come out.
I probably
I don't know.
wouldn't. At that point, I think then the logic almost becomes reversed, because a coach, from my perspective, is going to try to win games. Because if the national championship is off the table, you still have the bowl, right? So you're still going to be playing for that, and you're going to have your best players on the field. I just think, like, if they're winning games 59-14, you might not see Nick Chubb in the fourth quarter. And does that affect his overall production? Yes. But then it comes down to the eye test. You watch him for 3 quarters and say, this guy's amazing, and then you understand he didn't play the fourth because he didn't have to. So I don't think so. I think in the scheme of things that his production is probably going to speak for itself, and it's going to put him in a position where he's poised right there with Ezekiel, Elliott in terms of the top running backs vying for the Heisman.
Yeah, I could not agree more. They have an interesting dilemma at Georgia in their running back, just as Ohio State has in their quarterback position, in my opinion.
I think they have a lot of talented running backs.
Yeah.
I just don't see it being a situation where Chubb isn't the guy that the main focus is on.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Let's move on to my next one, which is I'm going to stay in the running back area. What about Derrick Henry from Alabama? This is a guy that obviously Alabama speaks for themselves. He is going to be the guy in the backfield. So I think that team, if they do well, Derrick Henry will do well. And I like this kid. He's a power back, but can run away from you, can put his head down when needed. So what do you think about Derrick Henry? Let me get your thoughts on that.
The SEC tend to be darlings. Alabama seems to be the darling of the SEC. So you've got double darlings. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's always going to be, I feel like whoever Alabama's best player is probably always going to be in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy. I think he's good. I think he's been playing for, a couple years, and even with Yeldon on the team, he's still produced. To a lesser extent, Kenyon Drake is still there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And he's been used for 3 years now. This will be at least his third year that I can effectively remember having the opportunity to use him. So I think I do think Henry is good. I think he's in a good position. He would definitely not be anywhere near my tier 1 running back Heisman.
Now, can I ask you something real fast? I ask you something? Okay. So we're talking about Derrick Henry. We're talking about, you just said that, Alabama is the darling of the world, of the SEC, and of college football. If Alabama, at the end of the season, is undefeated, they win the SEC title, all that fun stuff, will people be more apt? And like you said earlier about the quarterback, it is about the quarterback. Will the quarterback get the love, or can a running back get the love in that situation specifically?
I think a running back can get the love. I just don't think it's going to be him. That's just my opinion. I think for the most part, the focus is definitely going to be on the running game at Alabama, as if it hasn't for many years. They've produced some high talented running backs. They've not all lived up to their
NFL hype.
NFL hype, as those of us in Northeast Ohio could certainly attest to.
Well, you're not mentioning anybody
that's what happens when you do a charity basketball game and little children come up to you and ask for an autograph, and you hotshot them and you're too big for it. So I guess karma always does come around to get you, but
we digress on that.
You digress a lot. I mean, you've digressed at least 4 times this episode.
Yeah, I have to, because I don't want to offend a lot of people. I'm
all about offending anyone and everyone I can.
That's fine.
So that's going to be a good, dichotomy we're working with here, where you're going to be the ultra sensitive, and I'm just going to run my mouth until I can't anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that'll be very interesting to see the feedback.
But honestly, I think that quarterbacks end up being more likely to win.
Yeah.
At this point. But I wouldn't be shocked if he had a tremendous season, if he was in the conversation or won at the end of the year. He's just not my favorite right now at that position even. I think that there are guys who have maybe better opportunities. And I think that there's going to be a heavy focus on the running game at Alabama this year. I don't see how that's not going to be. They have an unsettled quarterback situation. I feel like Jacob Coker is going to somehow, again, not end up starting. Yeah. It seems to be a theme for him. He seems to be, wherever he's at and wherever he goes, he seems to be anointed and then have something happen that allows someone else to surpass him. They're down Amari Cooper. There's a lot of production missing from the table in Alabama. He's there to clean it up, but it does, is it the lack of other weapons around him that can allow defenses to really hone in on him? And I personally believe they can hone in on him better than they could hone in on Chubb or Ezekiel Elliott, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And, a statement that the University of Miami used to do is they don't rebuild, they reload. And I think that's what Alabama does. As much as, I personally don't like the SEC, and as much as I personally think that they're overrated coming into this season, Alabama's recruiting, Nick Saban down there, I mean, you cannot argue with what they've done. And I can't argue it, and I won't. But at the same time, this year, I don't know where that talent and where that production is going to come from, like you said.
Yeah, I think sometimes what happens is a team goes through a dramatic shift in the face and identity of what they are, and you can't rely on those guys that have been reliable for the previous few years. And really, the only way you can get a true feel on what's going to happen is wait for a quarter of the season to pass. You figure a lot of these teams end up playing lesser quality opponents at the beginning of the year, so anybody and everybody's going to have a big game. But when you start to get into your division and conference play, you really start to see how the targets get allocated, and it gives you a better feel as to who are the most important cogs in the machine.
Yeah, and I think it's a recruiting cycle. It's a cycle that every team goes through. And right now, I think the SEC, their cycle is coming to an end, where you're seeing top level recruits. Where in the past 7-8 years have been like, yeah, let's go to the SEC. Let's dominate. Let's do that. But now you're sitting here going 8 years later, where the SEC just has a plethora of recruits and a plethora of 5-star guys. Those 5-star guys today are looking at it and going, wow, I'm going to sit for 2 years. Oh, man, I'm going to sit for a year and a half. I don't want to do that. Let's go to Ohio State. Look what they're doing up there. Let's go there. Let's go to Miami. Can I say that?
Nope.
No, I can't say that. Okay. Let's go out to USC. Look what they're doing. Let's go to, the 4-star guys. Like, hey, let's go to Boise. Let me go there.
Go to Northern Illinois.
Yeah, let's go to and that's where I think you're seeing the SEC starting to make a drop back, to reality when it comes to recruiting. And I just think the cycle is starting to become more in the Big Ten with your Ohio States of the world and that type of offense. But
yeah, there's no question that there's going to be a cycling in and out of conferences where, just like you said, players are going to say, I have a lot of talent, but I don't want to take my talent and sit there for 2 years because it damages my future earning potential.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of guys who probably could have been first-round picks who got stuck in the second or third because in college they weren't given the full amount of time that some of the people ahead of them were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially in a place like the SEC, your LSU's, your Auburn's, Georgia even, these guys come in and they're 5-star recruits and, somehow they break into the lineup early and maybe they get bagged up at the end of the freshman season because they are freshmen. Now you bring in 2 more 5-star recruits, and instead of getting all the playing time, hey, now you're getting allocated to, well, you could play on third down. Well, here's a special teams for you. Well, you probably won't play anymore. You transfer. And to that, agreeing what you're saying that, there's so much talent out there that it maybe isn't coached up right, and that leaves or whatever the situation might be, but. I love recruiting. I love that whole the cycle of that and everything. But It's a fun process.
I think kind of piggybacking off of what you said, we'll go to one of my next guys. And his situation was kind of that, where he came in as a very high talent. In fact, he was the number one running back prospect to come into college football last year. And because of an action maybe he made on his first touchdown or some disagreements he had with the coach, he ended up not being as productive as he could have been and kind of shoved back until the end of the year, where we really saw him burst out of things, and that's Leonard Fournette.
Absolutely.
At LSU. I think he's a good example of one of those guys who, if they had just given him the ball, literally and figuratively, and just let him run with it, we could have seen one of the top rookie seasons ever. But I think you and I were discussing this before, and something had happened when he scored his first touchdown, the way he reacted. And
he did the Heisman
coach,
pose.
Yeah, the coach didn't like it, so...
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of how that could affect somebody's ability to earn in the long term. And it's not all about that when you're in college football, but at the same time, most of these guys have a very limited opportunity to earn. I'm all for them being able to sell their autographs and things of that nature. I am not for them getting paid, because my fear is that we're going to end up having them strike. And it's going to be a situation like we've seen in baseball, in hockey, where seasons are lost because collective bargaining rights come onto the table. We're not really going to discuss the whole pay-to-play situation night.
That's a podcast in itself, and we're definitely going to do that sometime in the future, because I could not disagree with you more. But
my whole perspective is, if somebody gave me the opportunity to earn an education.
What are you, Vince McMahon? Are you guaranteeing opportunities? What are you, Vince? Come on now.
But you're given the opportunity through a scholarship to play for free, to get your education for free, and it's your choice if you want to leave after your junior year to go to the NFL and not fulfill your degree.
Okay,
but
so
at
then
the same time, I mean, the school's making an investment in you, and they're spending a lot of money to make sure that you've got the things that you need. I don't know about how all of the conditions are at the school. I don't know if they're living in poverty at the school. I don't know what all of that is like.
So, but then it's okay for the school and the NCAA to make millions off Ken Dorsey's jersey or off Todd Gurley's jersey, Johnny Manziel. They could, put their jerseys online and sell them as Johnny Manziel jerseys.
Didn't I literally just say that I have no problem with them selling their jerseys? I think they should get a piece of the jersey sell. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If your name,
you should get.
Go ahead.
I can't fathom that you're saying they should get part of their merch sales, but they shouldn't get paid to have dinner. Or I don't understand. You can't have both.
I'm saying they shouldn't get paid like the NFL contracts are set up, where you get paid per game or you have a guaranteed contract. They're already getting a very high. I mean, I'm a guy who's sitting here who's going to have triple digits in thousands of college loan debt to repay that they're not going to have to do. Right? They're going to have their potential earnings in the future through jobs that they could get as a result of their education that was acquired for free, with the trade-off ultimately being that they played college football.
Uh-huh.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't think they should get contracts. Should Todd Gurley have been able to do the national convention and sign for $15,000 2 hours worth of autographs? Yes, I think it is asinine that a player cannot use themselves, who is their brand, to make money like that. I think they should be able to sign contracts where the university sells Todd Gurley jerseys and Todd Gurley gets X percentage of the proceeds. But I don't think Todd Gurley should be able to sell Todd Gurley jerseys and get the full amount of money, because he doesn't, you know what I mean? He doesn't own the school. He doesn't have the rights to use the logo of the school. And honestly, that's part of it. Part of it is not just the Gurley name. It's a Georgia logo. So I think there's co-branding opportunities there. I don't think that that's a question. I just don't think I'm on board with saying, yes, pay them money. And what's going to be fair? And is everybody going to have to be responsible for the same amount? Because I'm telling you right now, schools that are willing to spend more are going to get the talent, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I believe that this is going to happen, because I don't think we'll ever see NCAA athletes be paid. But to your aspect, there's no way you can differentiate between selling your autograph and getting merch, from the university and not being paid. You're not going to have that. You're going to have everything or nothing. The NCAA isn't going to say, hey, here's $1 on every jersey that we sell of yours, but yeah, we're not going to actually pay you for playing.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I don't think there's going to be a delineation either, but I'm saying that there is a middle ground that could satisfy some parties. Look, there's just some guys on a team, and an offensive lineman can be great, but even when they get to the NFL, they're going to find out there's no hope for jersey sales.
Yeah, and also in that aspect, do you pay, does a player going to Alabama get paid the same amount of a person going to Youngstown State? Or, okay, I know that's different, that's FBS,
just Eastern
FCS.
Michigan.
Okay, yeah, say Kent, Akron, Eastern Michigan, doesn't matter.
It can't be, because they can't afford the same, the revenues earned from television and from attendance, they aren't the same. That's what I'm saying. You're going to create such a drop off, so that there's going to be such a lack of degree. Like, if Ohio State plays Northern Illinois, I like Northern Illinois. I think they've got a good offensive setup. I think their defense is okay. I think they could make it potentially interesting. They're not going to come close to beating Ohio State, but they're going to make it somewhat interesting. If student athletes were to get paid, it would just be another 76-0 win moving right along by Ohio State. Well, what is that really going to do? If you know your team is going to get slaughtered, I'm not going to be that interested in going to see them. This is where the problem comes, and it is a good idea for a podcast for another day, so let's shift back to finishing up. If I had to take one last guy that I think would potentially be in the running, I would probably go with Cody Kessler from USC.
You stole my last guy.
Well, that's good, because we don't really have that much time left, so it works perfect that we could talk about him. I do feel bad that we haven't listed a receiver or a defensive player, but I just think realistically you're going to have a dramatic and truly special performance that is far set apart from the rest of your peers. We talked before, who was it from Ohio State you mentioned, Joey Bosa?
Yeah, if we're going a defensive guy that can make some noise, and the Jadeveon Clowney-ish hype, and that's going to be Joey Bosa.
Right, and he's going to have 5 more sacks, 10 more tackles. He's just going to have a dominant campaign. Same with the receiving end. If you wanted to look at a guy like Corey Coleman, who's got a good opportunity in Baylor, he's going to have such a dramatically different production level and importance to the program overall than the next guy at that position to really be considered. So that's why we've mostly looked at quarterbacks and running backs.
Yeah, and interesting to what you just said about the receiver. If a receiver has, say, 30 touchdowns, some unfathomable number, the quarterback is going to get the love, not the receiver.
Right. But Cody Kessler poses an interesting scenario. His top receiver is gone, and Nelson Aguilar. I don't think that's really that. He was a dynamic football player. I mean, watching him play, just wow. I mean, it seemed like he got better each week last year. Every time I watched him, he did something new that just made my jaw drop and just say, this guy has such an amazing potential and understanding of how the game goes. But he's still got a few guys, Adderey, Jackson, Juju Smith. He's got a few guys that are going to be able to step up, I believe, and give him some targets to work with.
Yeah, I mean, Cody Kessler, 39 touchdowns to 5 interceptions last year. That's a pretty good stat line. I'd take that any day of the week. USC playing in the Pac-12. I mean, it's them in Oregon. I mean, it really is. You can mention Arizona, you can mention Arizona State, but it's going to come down to USC and Oregon. And I really think, Cody Kessler, the quarterback, is the point guard, to put it in the basketball terms on the football field. And Cody Kessler has an high IQ, and this guy has accuracy. I mean, when he wants to be, he can be very accurate, and he can run. I'm not saying he likes to run, but he can move if he needs to. So I'm really, really excited for this team. I'm excited for USC to be the USC of old. So I'm really excited to what Cody Kessler can do this year.
I agree, and I'm going to make my first fantasy advice of the season right here. When I believe they play Cal every year, and I am just advising the populace right now. I'm looking at the schedule. Halloween, October 31st, they are playing Cal. Cody Kessler has amazing career stats against the Cal program.
He actually, you're talking about how athletes don't own the rights. Cody Kessler actually owns the rights to Cal. It's weird how that works out, but he actually owns them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I think if you do go looking like all the trademarks he owns,
yeah,
I mean, it's ridiculous. So you just make a note right now that Cal's passing defense over the past several years, saying that it's suspect is an offense to all other schools that have suspect defense. I mean, they've been run over. Just like you mentioned, wasn't that the game? Was that the game that Connor Halliday passed for 483,000 passing yards and 17,000 touchdowns?
Yeah, the Washington State game against Cal. Yeah, absolutely.
And he wasn't the only one who had performances like that. I mean, I believe that Colorado and Spruce had a huge game. I'm just saying, I remember I was not on the Cody Kessler train last year, and I saw the game against Cal, and I proceeded to beat my head against the wall for at least 15 minutes. But that's a great place to end. We certainly would enjoy to hear some of your feedback, so don't hesitate listening to this episode. Comment on our Facebook, where you can find us at College Football Pros, on Twitter at CFB Pros, or visit us online at www.cfbpros.com. My name is Nick, and Drew is joining me as always, and we are College Football Pros, and we will see you next time.